Hello, bonjour. My name is Stephanie Cadieux, and I'm Canada's Chief Accessibility Officer. My pronouns are she, her, and today I am wearing a purple jacket, and I'm a white woman with brown hair and glasses. While we are all on different locations around the world, I'm joining from my home in Surrey, British Columbia, on the traditional unceded lands of the Coast Salish people, the Katzie, the Squamish, the Katzie, the Semiahmoo, and the Kwanlin. And I invite everyone to reflect on where they're joining from today. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us on the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. The theme for this year is amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities for an inclusive and sustainable future. I think the conversation we're about to have will be very much in keeping with that theme. Now, my role as Chief Accessibility Officer was created by the Accessible Canada Act in 2019. My job here in Canada is to monitor and report on the progress being made under the Act, how Canada is doing when it comes to accessibility, what's working, and where are there challenges. The Act has 7 priority areas: employment, transportation, the built environment, information and communications technologies, or ICT, communication, other than ICT, procurement of goods, services, and facilities, and the design and delivery of programs and services. I'm often asked about how other countries are doing with accessibility and disability inclusion, particularly in these priority areas. So are there any lessons to be learned from international models, or are there any countries that might benefit from looking at what we're doing here in Canada? When I get the question, my answer is always that I don't think anyone's gotten it all right or all wrong. We stand to learn a great deal from one another. The Accessible Canada Act is a milestone piece of legislation that includes principles that other countries might look to adopt. For example, it prioritizes consulting people with disabilities, and it was developed based on the social model of disability, which recognizes that barriers are systemic, that disability isn't the problem, but the barriers are. And so it places the onus on the system to identify, remove, and prevent them. Over the past 2.5 years, I've had conversations with leaders in accessibility from around the world, and I've learned a lot from them. In honor of this IDPD, I wanted to let you in on some of those conversations. So I'm really excited to have brought together a panel of international leaders so that we might all benefit from their experiences and insights around accessibility. So with that, it's my honor to introduce you to a number of my international friends and our panel today in alphabetical order. Dr. Shani Danda, Disability and Inclusion Accessibility Specialist, a social entrepreneur and broadcaster who's been named the UK's most influential disabled person and the BBC's 100 Women Laureate of 2020. The Honourable Carrie-Anne Eiffel, longtime disability advocate and former president of the Senate of Barbados. She was the youngest person, the first woman, and the only person with a disability to fill this role. Yat Lee, an influential Hong Kong Canadian disability advocate and current associate director at Accessible Employers, who's reshaping workplace culture across North America. Tricia Maloney, the Chief Accessibility Advocate to the Department of Transport and Planning in her home state of Victoria, Australia. Her role is to amplify the voices of people with disabilities. She developed a global survey for public transport users, which will be sent out annually to people with disabilities internationally. And Jeff Wissel, the first ever Chief Accessibility Officer with Disability In out of the USA, working to advance accessibility and disability inclusion efforts with corporate partners in the United States. So thanks to each of you for being here today. Our conversation is happening across a lot of time zones, so your willingness to share your time with us is extra appreciated. Some of you it's very early, and for some of you it's very late. So let's get started. What are you most excited about in accessibility right now? What is going on in accessibility that you think is the next, quote, big thing? I'll start with Shani.
Hi, thank you. By the way of a visual description, I'm a South Asian woman in my late 30s, and I'm wearing a lilac jumper and have long dark brown hair. There's a few things that I'm excited about, but I'm going to just pick two and talk about them briefly.
Hmm.
The first one is adaptive fashion. Now, here in the UK, we haven't had much of it at all, but we know that our friends across the pond, especially in the US, and Canada, have had options that we haven't. But we are now seeing it come to our high street, with retailers like Primark, who I'm really fortunate to work with and help them on their journey. But I know that many other retailers and fashion brands are working on this, and I know we're going to be seeing so many more options as well coming soon. And we've already have started. I saw Anthropologie's amazing collection recently, which just looked incredible. So that's one thing. And the second thing that I'm really excited about, but do have some concerns, is AI. I think AI has so much potential when it comes to assistive technology, in helping us be more efficient and improve our lives. However, I do have to caveat this by saying that's only if the way in which AI is being taught and the learning models that are being used are from an intersectional and accessible point to begin with in the first place. And I have seen both really good and not so great examples of that. So those are the two things that I'm really excited about.
Great. Carrie Ann, what about you?
Well, Shani stole my AI, but I do agree with her on both aspects of it. It's amazing what it can do to transform the lives of persons with disabilities. And I like, I'd have to say, technology is my bailiwick. That's the area I love to play in. And the advantage in assistive technology for me are the major part of is the next big thing for me, what it's bringing about. As a trainer, and as a teacher who works with young persons who are visually impaired primarily, it's amazing what is now available through the use of technology to make the lives of students. I was recently introduced to Math Kicker AI, which is an AI tool for math for the blind and visually impaired. And it's amazing what we have available to us. But we also need to remember that these things are not our masters, they are tools. And because they are tools, we need to be able to use the tools for good and make sure that they do not replace us does not reduce our opportunities. So that's it for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, what about you?
Thank you, Stephanie. And for visual descriptions, I'm deaf and hard of hearing. I wear ear prosthesis and have black hair and wearing glasses. Great question, Stephanie. I'm really excited about some of the regulatory changes and right now and a broader adoption of the key principle, nothing about us without us. I work closely with employers and especially, small, medium, and larger size businesses. We're seeing higher adoption of inclusive hiring practices, digital access to development of neurodiversity-friendly spaces, for example. One particular trend I'm really excited about is being able to capture accessibility data and analytics for employers, and tapping into a little bit of what Shani and Carrie Ann mentioned: AI, machine learning, and technology to collect all of these metrics to make informed, data-driven improvements. And to answer your second part of your question, the next best thing, in accessibility, being deaf and hard of hearing myself, I'm predicting that, real-time sign language translation to be a big thing in the next 3 to 5 years. And there's over, I think, the last I checked, close to 350,000 culturally deaf Canadians and over 3 million hard of hearing Canadians today. And I'm particularly interested to see how AI can translate sign language simultaneously. So, we be able to communicate, especially in areas where there's high percentage of people asking for directions, like an airport, for example, and being able to have that simultaneous translation and interpretation will be really key for communication access.
Yeah, so that tech, those assistive tech things are right up there. Trisha, can I go to you about Down Under?
Yes, you certainly can. For me, it's really about the inclusion of people with disabilities and the recognition of people with disabilities as the experts. And for too long, we have not been the experts. We have actually been the people who have been spoken down to and told what we need. So in my role, I should have said too that I'm a 70-year-old woman wearing a multicoloured top. And I'm sitting in a bright background in my office in the city. I'd also like to pay my respects to our elders, past, present and emerging. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people, which is unceded land. So thank you for that reminder. And I also want to pay my respects to people with disabilities who have come before us, who've paved the way for us to be where we are. So there you go. But I work in transport and planning, which is about everything. So I'm internal and external. I don't have a PD and I don't have any markers around what I do. I can do what I like. I can go where I like. I can open any door and look in any closet and see what's really happening. And we now have a program where we are bringing together people with disabilities with our engineers and our designers to actually build a tram, build a train. Last week, I hosted a workshop for people with disabilities and bus manufacturers and bus companies so that we're in at the ground floor. Instead of them building something and then saying, look what we've done, we need to be there first. And that's starting to roll out across the whole of Australia now. We don't have an act that says that, but we do have the National Disability Strategy and the State Disability Plan, which says that we should be doing it. I see it as the next big thing because nobody knows better than us what we need. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks very much. And Jeff, let's round this one out with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for this.
Thing?
Thanks for this opportunity. So I'm Jeff Whistle. I'm a white male, 57, very thinning hair, and in my home office in Cincinnati, Ohio. And today I'm proud to share that I am legally blind with a degenerative eye disease. I'll share more about that later. I'm going to share 4 things that really excite me. Like everyone mentioned, generative AI in its current form, I think is pretty incredible when it enhances accessibility. All the unconscious bias and all that information, we really have to pay attention to that. But oh my gosh, being able to use an app called Be My Eyes, and it's a call to action for anyone who wants to be a sighted guide. You can download the app and sign up to be a sighted guide for folks like me who will use the app when I need sighted assistance. But they were one of the first to partner with OpenAI, I believe it was, to do being able to take a picture and have that picture described in incredible detail. It's pretty amazing. Meetings like Zoom, Teams, WebEx, Google Meet. I mean, to have the technology to bring us all together all around the world, to have captioning, to be able to have ASL and French interpreters and so forth all together, and to have the artificial intelligence be able to summarize and highlight for comprehension, just all these incredible things. Augmented reality, I think, is really amazing. It has such current and future potential. There are doctors that are doing physical therapy virtually, and then also post-traumatic stress and PTSD. Folks who are neurodiverse, being able to have a virtual environment to work on social aspects and things like that. Today is just pretty incredible. And the last thing, I like to geek out on smart home technology, being able to turn lights on with voice or gestures, and every every disability, everyone without a disability can benefit from being able to control things, even virtually. All these different things are just amazing.
Yeah. Again, back to the tech and AI, and yes, with all of the risks and all of the things we need to be very cognizant of and very intentional about ensuring that that people with disabilities are not disadvantaged through the evolution. The opportunity to increase independence and autonomy with these tools is pretty fantastic. And Shani, I'm with you on the fashion. So now, which country would each of you say is leading the way when it in any of the priority acts or priority areas under the Accessible Canada Act? So the Built Environment, Transportation, Programs and Services, Communications, ICT. So where do you see a best practice emerging in one of those areas? From your own experience, from your own research, what do you think? Carrie Ann, let me start with you.
Hi. Well, before I go there, I have to say I forgot to do the whole visual description thing. That's so new to me. So I am a Black woman. People tell me I look like a chocolate color, I guess. So yeah, that's me, dark brown with long dreadlocks. They're black, and I'm wearing a green dress. So there you go. Oh, and I'm totally blind. So that's a sort of a description of me. So you know what? Every country is amazing me, but for me, I think India is presenting some of the most advanced moving. They recently had their general elections, and when you think of a country the size of India doing the you know, the way that they do their election process takes nearly 6 weeks, I believe, but they were able to make sure that it was inclusive and accessible. Their strategies on employment and everything, they're really moving forward at a beautiful rate. And the interesting thing about that is a lot of people think of places like India as being depressed and underprivileged and disadvantaged. And all of those things are true. They do have a lot of challenges there, but somehow they are able to channel the energy to be more inclusive of persons with disabilities, from the legislative prospects right down to actually implementing. So for me, it would have to be India.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really impressed too with their sort of with India's commitment to or intention to be the leader in assistive tech as
Yes.
well.
Their intentionality is really powerful.
Yeah. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, the UK is widely considered a global leader here, specifically prioritizing employment accessibility and inclusion for people with disabilities. And I view them as trailblazers in this area. And of course, they have the really comprehensive accessibility legislation before any other country did with the Equality Act in 2010, which really combines almost all previous anti-discrimination laws into one piece of legislation. So, oftentimes, we see countries like UK take the lead, but I'm very impressed with some of the Southeast Asian countries when it comes to incorporating communication access into transportation. For example, recently I was in Singapore about a year and a half ago, and I was taking public transportation, and I was able to see sign language incorporated into many of the multimedia in news. For example, the 6 o'clock news will always have communication access, sign language translation, interpretation, and that's something that I would love to see more of here.
Yeah, that's really great. Trisha, what about you?
Well, earlier this year, I did an 11-week round the world trip looking at accessibility globally. No, that's where I met Stephanie in person. And, to me, the issues are the same all over the world. And everybody's doing a bit of it really well. Singapore, I know, has transport down pat, even though I didn't get to Singapore. And Vancouver does precincts really well. They also do automatic ticketing really well. So everybody's doing a bit, and I think the beauty of this is that we can share what everybody's doing well. Ireland has a wayfinding centre, which has a train, a tram, a bus, an airline fuselage, a streetscape, a dog toileting area for guide dogs. And it has everything there. And they use it as a way of helping people to understand how to use public transport effectively. So we're all quite powerful people and can find our way around, but others can't. And they also use it for research and for innovation. And I know that they're looking at the airline insides to see what they can do with wheelchairs. And I think that's really important. And I'm hoping to set one up here. I've told our minister that we need one, but let's see what happens.
That's great. Jeff, what about you? What do you think is where is somebody leading?
I agree with what everyone said so far. For me, being here in the United States and having the opportunity as Chief Accessibility Officer to work with over 560 corporations here in the United States and really learn about the time, money, resources, and innovation that they're putting into empowering their workforce with disabilities and removing barriers, and certainly for their customers and society at large to allow everyone to fully participate so they can feel like they belong and bring their diversity of thought to the table. But I must say, even though we've had the American Disability Act for 34 years and amazing leaders that went before us to get us to where we are, I'm super jazzed about what the European Union is doing. There's the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. People with disabilities are going to be counted, and it's part of their sustainability. People with disabilities are valued in the corporate world. That's pretty awesome. And this amazing thing called the European Accessibility Act, which kicks in June of 2025, it has teeth behind it. All 27 member states of the European Union have to certify the accessibility of products that are, if they can't for a new product, the member state can stop that launch of that new product. There are fines that can be associated with it, but it's all about removing barriers for folks with disabilities to be able to work and just connect and just shop and do things. It has teeth behind it, and I'm just really excited about what that's going to do, not just for the EU, but around the world. Lots of different opportunities there.
Yeah, exactly. We are a global marketplace, so what happens in one ultimately affects the other. Just sometimes not fast enough. But I agree with you. I think the EU is doing some really good work. Their standard on ICT is setting a new standard, certainly globally. Shani, what about you? What do you think on this set?
I really agree with Jeff, and I guess being so close to the EU, being here in London, lots of people are gearing up to be compliant in time or perhaps apply for an extension. But as Jeff said, it's really got teeth behind it. You know, it's a big deal come June 2025 if a business cannot legally continue to do its business within the EU member states because they are not accessible. And I think it would definitely have a knock-on effect for other countries around the world. But for me personally, I am really impressed with the UAE, particularly Dubai and the infrastructure around accessibility there, because this starkly contrasts my travels in other countries. I've been to 44 countries and I live in London. And I feel like, especially in the UK, we have quite outdated systems and attitudes, and it can turn simple things into something quite exhausting. For example, I can't use the tube system, the underground metro system. Only a quarter of our stations are step-free. Whereas in Dubai, all of the infrastructure, it's new. They don't have this legacy of inheriting old infrastructure, but because accessibility has been there from the start, you know, they have level access, There's lifts and step-free access across the whole metro system in Dubai. It's got tactile paving, it's super, super accessible. So public transport and getting around, I think, is really important. But I just feel like accessibility is woven into everything there, and I think so many other countries can learn a lot from that sort of ethos.
Yeah, and I think for me, with all of your answers, it comes back to me to the fact that nobody's got everything right, but there are pockets of excellence in every country, everywhere you go, and what I think is so exciting right now is that although individually and on a daily basis, people with disabilities, no matter where they live, are facing barriers of one form or another. In my 30 years, I have not ever felt this much momentum in the right direction. And I think what we're seeing is sort of we've reached that tipping point where enough people have realized now that 27% of the population can't be ignored, and so we're seeing leaps and bounds made now, not only because of technology and the advances there, but in the attitudes and in the intentions of lawmakers and corporations and what have you. So I think it's really exciting. That
Stephanie,
said,
this
go
is
ahead,
Jeff. If I could, real quick.
Yeah, please.
I know we were all thinking this, but we didn't verbalize it. It's pretty darn cool that Canada has the Accessible Canada Act and a Chief Accessibility Officer of Canada. So kudos to everything that you're doing and that Canada is doing for accessibility.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. Now, that said, there is lots of movement in the right direction, right here in Canada and around the world. But there are barriers, and we face them all the time. What would you say is your biggest barrier right now, not for you, the individual, but for you representing your country? Where are the sticky points right now as it relates to one of those areas that our Accessible Canada Act covers? Your turn to go first.
Yeah, thanks. I think, I'm going to focus a bit more on employment here, as I'm very familiar with this in my work. And, when it comes to employment, under the Accessible Canada Act, it would really benefit Canadians where there's a central place for resources and expertise to support the act. Like, a resource hub that would drive tangible key benefits for employers, especially small businesses, where in Canada they account for 99.8% of businesses in this country.
Right.
So for employers, is essentially a one-stop shop, and for compliance information, guidance on standards, how-to guides, implementation. And the reason I bring this up is because in British Columbia, we have Accessible Employers, an initiative of the President's Group, where we are the resource hub for British Columbia employers. And it's worked amazingly well. We have employers that have now taking some of our work into leadership roles, taking the learnings and data into research, and positively impacting, British Columbians throughout the province. And in terms of granular employment, I do see, of course, some barriers when it comes to inaccessible job descriptions, lack of accommodations in job interviews, to missed opportunities for onboarding even. And one interesting stat, if I might, that I just learned of recently is that effective onboarding can increase employee retention by up to 82%. So, the inclusive onboarding experience is very, very important.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Tricia, in your country.
So, the attitudes of people towards people with disabilities is the biggest barrier we face. So the assumptions that if you have an intellectual disability, you need to be in supported employment, or the assumption that your accommodations will be costly. So for me, I can't walk. Well, I use calipers and crutches to get around. So all I need is a chair. But it's almost like a panic when you walk into a room at an interview, like, oh, what am I going to do now? In Australia, we have job access, which is funding for people to provide accommodations for things like an accessible bathroom if there isn't one, to build a ramp if there isn't one. But we're encouraging employers, if you provide a phone, then you need to provide technology that a person with a disability can use. So really, just the assumptions that people have about our ability. And so I'm thinking back to when I was working in the gender space, and people would say, yes, we can employ a woman, but she has to be able to do the job. And we're now doing that with people with disabilities. Yes, we can employ a person with a disability, but they must be able to do the job, as though we can't. You know, there are people with disabilities. We have an amazing surgeon. No, he's not a surgeon. He's a emergency trauma doctor, and he's a quadriplegic after an accident. And he's now working in the emergency room, and it has really enhanced his practice. As he says, the only thing he can't do is give an injection or cut somebody. And he said, nurses do the injections and he doesn't want to cut anybody anyway. So just the assumptions about what we're capable of.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. In the work that I'm doing with the country, I still feel that the attitudinal bias is still one of the biggest challenges we have to overcome, because it is that unconscious bias that it's niggling under the surface, and people don't realize it's there, and they don't realize how it's coming out in the decisions that they're making, in the interactions that they're having. And until we can really start rooting that out, we're not going to make as much progress as we want, even if people are saying all the right things. If they can't see their own roadblocks, we're not going to make that progress. So I'm in agreement. Jeff, what do you see as the biggest barrier at the moment?
I'm going to focus on employment and procurement.
Je vais me concentrer sur les achats et l'emploi, pardon. Enfin, il y a aussi des obstacles et des occasions. Lorsque l'on parle, enfin, vraiment, donc, on en a mentionné, enfin, de l'accueil, l'emploi, la réception, enfin, on entendait plusieurs webinaires où l'on a l'expérience de les technologies et d'aide qui ne fonctionnent pas. Alors, commencer avec un nouvel employeur et d'avoir des obstacles là parce que le logiciel n'est pas donc prévu pour l'accessibilité. Alors, donc, l'accessibilité, donc, nous sommes honorés de faciliter une initiative qui s'appelle Procure Access. Procure Access, vraiment, c'est conçu pour aider les sociétés à reconnaître qu'elles peuvent faire avancer l'accessibilité grâce au processus des achats en mettant les exigences d'accessibilité dans leur contrat pour évaluer les logiciels et les produits et les services au niveau de la sélection des fournisseurs avant de mettre en place demander à des employés d'utiliser un produit qui n'est peut-être pas idéal pour la technologie. Alors, et aussi, nous avons aussi une déclaration d'accès pour les achats, pour les vendeurs, les fournisseurs et les compagnies. C'est aussi qu'ils n'ont pas le soutien.
Well, when buyers and sellers work collaboratively to contractually obligate each other, because we're all buyers and sellers, right, of products and services, it can advance and it can enhance accessibility by companies like Microsoft, Google, JP Morgan, Fidelity, Salesforce, Verizon, signing on to the Procure Access statement where they're publicly committing to working collaboratively with other buyers and sellers to advance accessibility through their procurement practices. The last thing that I'm going to share really quick too is think about all of the disability-owned businesses out there. Disability In is a certifying organization for disability-owned businesses. When they're certified, they show up on the radars of major companies. Without being certified, they may not show up on the supplier diversity. And there's women-owned, minority-owned, LGBTQ, veteran-owned, and so forth. Getting these companies certified, it helps their employment, and they employ people with disabilities. So those would be the two areas that I would say are barriers, but amazing opportunities at the same time.
Absolutely. Excuse me. I'm going to cough. Shani, can I pass it to you?
Yeah, sure. I really agree with everything that has been raised so far, and I too want to talk about employment. Here in the UK, we know that disabled people are twice as likely to be unemployed, and that we have to apply for 60% more jobs. And on the 7th of November marked our Disability Pay Gap Day, and that effectively means that from the 7th of November, disabled people are effectively working for free for the rest of the year, because that's how wide the disability pay gap is. And it's important to note that when we talk about disability pay gaps, we're not looking at one job role and comparing different people and their salaries. What we're looking at is the difference and the amount of disabled people in work and the level in which they are able to work at, and that causes these big pay gap disparities. But we also have something here called Access to Work, and it's a government scheme. It's not a welfare benefit. It's actually it's a grant which you don't have to pay back, and it's on paper it's fantastic, and I also think it's our government's best kept hidden secret. So Access to Work is there to help disabled people get in and stay in work. And the current amount per year that a disabled person could claim up to is £70,000. However, it's all, based on assessments and what you need. Just because that's the amount doesn't mean you're going to get it. But unfortunately, it's a severely underserved service, and we currently have 55,000 people waiting for an answer on that application, and they've been in that process of a
Oh,
job
there she goes.
away for over a year. So on paper, it's amazing, and I really hope now we have a new government that they're able to sort out these issues, because we have over 1 million disabled people that can and want to work, but face so much stigma and barriers that they're disenfranchised from doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating that again, that these sort of lines that are crossing countries, right? Where are the barriers? Where are the problems? The same places everywhere, right? And yet, we look to the UK as a leader in employment, but it's not perfect, right? There's still a long way to go, and a lot of work to be done, and it just is. It's just devastating to think about. Excuse me, the number of people with disabilities who have so much talent and energy to bring to work, and who are on the sidelines, and we have to change that. Carrie Ann, wrap us up on this one. What's the biggest accessibility barrier in Barbados?
Coming from one of the what we call the underdeveloped countries, I'd have to say one of the biggest barriers to access remains financial resources. We have so many persons with disabilities in Barbados who are living on or below the poverty line, and it's because we don't have enough finances to go around. So when it comes to inclusive education, you don't have enough to spend on the resources for your students with disabilities. When it comes to employment, I'd love to have an access to work program here. I'd love to have all of those things, but we don't. And it's because we don't have the finances to do it. We have the political will here. We have only 2 weeks ago, our government laid the disabilities policy 2023 to 2030. Yeah, 7-year policy. And we're hopefully going to bring the legislation to Parliament sometime soon on that one. But the problem is implementation and access to the finances that we need. This morning, I was having a conversation with a blind guy, and he is telling me about the deplorable condition of his home. and the fact that he can't get the finances to repair his home. He said, you know, nobody told him how little money he'd have to live on when he became disabled. His job was in transportation. So I said, well, I can teach you to do many things, but I will not be teaching you how to drive again as a blind person. But that being said, he now has to live on less than $500 a month. That's his social security. And nobody can live on that, not independently. Yeah. So I'd have to say financial resources. Attitude, first, last, and always. There is no barrier bigger than attitude. You can have all the legislation and all the programs and policies in place, but when you walk into a room and you get that ice, that shock, that entirely I'm not ready to deal with you attitude, it's unbelievable. I'll just end off by saying recently the government implemented digital ID cards, and wonderful. You could have disability printed on the card if you wanted to, and the QR code would show up what disability category you fell into. And the attitudes were so against this whole, oh, nobody must know my business and everybody doesn't want to know this and that they've had to stop the process because they have to review it. Attitudes. That's what the problem was.
Yeah, well, again, I'm not surprised to hear it. The attitudes, the understanding, definitely is a barrier, and I would expect to hear that, you know, across our countries, across the world, the financial state for people with disabilities broadly is a challenge everywhere as well. One that obviously employment, if we could fix that, would solve for a great deal, not for everyone, but would solve for a great number of people. So let's go to this. Let's from the negativity to the positive. If you had a magic wand and you could fix anything in accessibility, what would you fix first? Where would you go first? And I'm going to start with Tricia.
Thank you. That's a really interesting question because I'm often yelled at because my magic wand doesn't work and I haven't fixed transport yet. And it's people with disabilities who yell at me.
Of course.
So
That's
I
right.
think I would actually say two things I want to fix. One is I want the Treasury to understand that disability is worth funding because if you get it right for us, it will actually improve the economic benefits of the whole country. And the other thing I would like to fix is procurement in this country and government. So procurement in this country is, for government, is that we have two categories of social procurement. One is for First Nations people, and that means that people get extra credits if they purchase from companies that are owned and run by First Nations people. In the disability space, it's for businesses that employ people with disabilities, and they provide a list of those businesses, but they're not businesses owned by people with disabilities. They're actually sheltered workshop. So they're rewarding people for paying their staff $3.48 an hour. Right. So if I could fix something, and I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to procurement officers in government about why this is a problem. And most people don't know that the people that they're doing business with only pay their staff $3.48 an hour. And they do it legally because they're people with disabilities. So those are the two big things I'd like to fix.
And they are big ones, but I wish you luck. Jeff, how about you?
I absolutely love this question. The magic wand is one of my favorite questions. For me, I would change the unemployment rate for those of us with disabilities.
Yeah.
And When you think about it, and this is for anybody that's watching this that has an opportunity to hire people, those of us with disabilities, we have to find alternative ways to do traditional things. Depending on our disabilities, we are solving problems 24/7.
Yeah.
There's innovation, there's creativity. So my magic wand is to change the mindset. And instead of waiting till all the accessibility issues are fixed before we hire those of us with disabilities, hire people with disabilities to fix the accessibility issues that exist in legacy software and all these other aspects.
Right.
I'm going to throw a word out there. Has anybody heard of texting on a phone? Texting was designed as an effective means of communication for folks who are deaf, hard of hearing. I bet you almost everybody's texted during this presentation. It was essential for some, beneficial for everyone. Accessibility, generally speaking, benefits everyone. Hire people with disabilities and you create better products and services and you increase your market share. That's
Love
my
it.
magic wand.
Love it. Shani, what would you change? Well, if you just had to
Yeah.
what would you do?
Oh, it's such a good question. It's such a hard question, but I was going to say something very similar to what Jeff just ended on there. I believe genuinely if globally people understood that we all benefit from accessibility, like there's so many things that exist because they were originally created for a disabled person or for specific communities, but it benefits everybody. I really think we would reframe this whole narrative of disability being viewed as tragic to actually us as a society designing for our future selves, because we all have abilities and we all have limits to those abilities, and that can all change at any time. And living with a health condition or experiencing disability is just an average part of the human experience,
Yeah.
but we never talk about it like that. And things like how the majority of disabled people have acquired their condition. I really wish we were as societies and communities with more thinking about how we're going to design for our future selves and how can we make everything work for the most range of human diversity that exists. And I really think by changing those attitudes and reframing this whole conversation, it would definitely mean attitudes towards disabled people would change as well. So that's the world that I hope to live in one day.
Me too. Carrie Ann, what would you do if you could just say abracadabra? Oh, you're on mute.
See, now there's a problem with being in a panel discussion like this. Panel discussion like this, everybody gets the good stuff in. So,
Ha!
because employment, definitely. Attitudes, that's right up there. If I had to choose, transportation would be definitely another one. But honestly, if I had to change something, if I could just do a magic wand, it would definitely be the perceptions, the attitudes of others, but also of persons with disabilities. I think sometimes we forget that we grew up in the same society as everybody else. We drink the same milk, we drink the same water, we eat the same foods, we know the same things. Unfortunately, a lot of us buy into the same narrative when it comes to disabilities as well. And so, as Shani pointed out, a lot of us acquiring our disabilities later on in life, we've been indoctrinated into a way of thinking about disability. So when we talk about removing attitudes, sometimes we think we focus on the attitudes of the temporarily able-bodied community towards us. And we don't remember that sometimes we also need to change the attitudes of how we see ourselves. Because when you can see that your blindness, your wheelchair using, your deafness, your whatever, is just a part of the human condition. It's just another part of what it is that that we are navigating life with. When a lot more people are comfortable with who they are, I think that too will help to improve the attitudes of others towards us. But if we continue to see ourselves, as a lot of people still do, if we continue to see ourselves as the tragic victims, the perpetual person that's going to be looked down on, the one that's left out all the time, if that's the attitude that we buy into all the time, we're also defeating ourselves. So I think we also need to look at all of that as well.
It's going to take everyone.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it does. It
Yeah.
does.
Yat, wrap this one up for us.
Thank you. I have a hard act to follow here, but I have two things on my magic wand here. I really want to see more senior leadership buy-in and also accessibility champions in all businesses, and to really understand that, we're operating in a social model of disability. Remove those attitudinal barriers, remove those lenses of ours, and to understand that, hiring people with disabilities is great for your business. And number two is really to remunerate people with disabilities for their experiences. When, no one works for free, and people with disabilities shouldn't either. And when we are promoting the guiding principles, nothing about us without us, that also means remunerating living wages or consulting fees for people with disabilities to be part of the community, and especially to generate content. And we recently did that with a couple of our work, and it's been a really amazing experiences getting to work with the disability community to generate amazing content for the community.
It's great, and I agree completely. We are subject matter experts, and if we are being asked to contribute as such, that needs to be taken into account. Far too often, anything related to disability is looked at as charitable, as something that gets done if there's time, if there's money, and when we have the opportunity, rather than, as I like to say, it being an essential part of any operation, right? As essential as the heat, turning on the heat or the lights. Absolutely,
And then
it does.
And I'm sorry, I just had to say that, because it's as if it's not just the charity part that irritates me, really, honestly. It's the I inspire you. This is so inspiring. This is how I get my medicine type of attitude that they bring to us. And you're just like, I'm living over here. Can you just leave me alone and provide the things I need to just live? I'm not here to inspire you because I wake up this morning with a disability. I'm just living.
It's
Can
true.
I just add to that?
Yeah.
I don't know if this happens to anybody else anywhere else. I don't need to be prayed for by people in the street. I'm quite happy as I am. I don't need to be cured, and Jesus won't love me any better if I am cured.
Hey,
and if I am
Trish.
cured, it will ruin my career, can I tell you?
Trish, stop stepping on my lanes. I agree with you. Listen, if I've had $1 for every time somebody prayed for me, no, I'm a practicing Christian, okay? But as far as I'm concerned, God didn't make a mistake. He wasn't asleep the morning I went blind. There was a reason for this, and I'm happy with this. I told somebody up to last week, if I could take a pill to make me see tomorrow, I'd hand it off to somebody else because I don't need it.
Yeah, well, you're certainly showing the world that. So here's a question for you, and it kind of goes back a little bit to to something, Carrie Ann, you said a minute or two ago about the fact that we too live in this world that has opinions about disability, that disability is less, and that we too, as people with disabilities, live with that mindset. Some of us, at least, and at some times. So, a bit of a cheeky question, but have you ever made an accessibility blunder? Have you ever gone and done something and went, oops, after the fact? Have you ever had a learning moment when it comes to accessibility? Jeff?
I can think of a personal and a professional. And I'll change the word on the professional from a blunder to just one of my key life lessons regarding my vision loss. I mentioned I'm 57. It really wasn't until I was 48 that I self-disclosed my vision. My wife said I tried covering, and my wife said, "You really didn't cover that well towards the end." For me, my journey, I felt that my vision loss was a weakness. It was certainly a vulnerability for me. I know how personal self-disclosure is, how it can potentially impact employment or interviews, all these different things. So I understand it's totally a personal decision. For me, if I had my magic wand, I would have embraced it earlier than I did, because I lead with my vision loss now, my cane, something I fought against, I fight for. It's given me independence and all these wonderful things. It's just my life journey. I wouldn't really change it for the world, but oh my gosh, for anyone out there, when that light bulb goes off and you realize, wow, it's really my strength. It's life enhancing. On a professional level, just we were I was in the financial world for 28 years with a leading financial firm, and we were changing how we did something regarding TTY, a corporate policy and so forth. And I thought I had all the stakeholders. I was positive I had all the stakeholders at the table. This was a multi-month process, and I quickly realized, almost before we were ready to make this change, that there was someone that wasn't at the table, and it was the team that actually had to deliver the change message to our corporate partners. And so the lesson that I've learned there, whenever we change anything for accessibility, continually ask, is everyone at this table that should be here before we make any decisions? So personal and professional change there.
Shani, what about you? Have you ever had one of those moments?
Oh, absolutely. And who hasn't? But I think that really helps us to understand that there is no end point when it comes to accessibility,
So
and
true.
that it's a marathon, and you choose to get on that track. And just reflecting on my own practices, today on LinkedIn, I posted a video. My video had captions, my video has a video description, and in the main body of text, a video transcript. I wasn't doing that a long time ago, but I've learned that that is actually good practice. That's best practice. I'm trying to make, my content as accessible as I possibly can. So there's definitely times where I didn't know to do that, but as soon as I did know, I'm doing it. And what that does mean is perhaps I have to do things differently. I might not be able to put things out as quickly because I want to make sure everything is accessible as possible. So I think it's more that, like, we're all still learning, and we all should still always have that curiosity to learn, and not everything, oh, we know everything, and this might be a bit of our lived experience. There's so much for us all to learn in this.
Absolutely. Carrie Ann.
Well, recently the government has concluded a process that started 27 months before, and that's to revamp our constitution, because we became a republic about 3 years ago. And I had the honor to be the only person with a disability chosen to sit on the panel of 10. And everything was great. We had our fights and everything. And as we were closing off, one of the younger members on the panel was all enthusiastic, and she wanted to put an about the cover on the inside cover of the Constitution. And I said no. But then I thought about it and I realized, and actually she wrote to me and she said, but I thought this would be helpful for persons who are visually impaired to have this big description of what of what was on the front cover. But now part of that, caveats in place, I'm one of those people who I'm not that curious about how things look. And I forget that there are persons who need to have that information, because accessibility is not about one size fits all. Accessibility is that everybody has to be accommodated. So while Carrie Ann doesn't need to know that the guy on the front cover is wearing a purple shirt with a green tie, Jeff may need to know that. And somebody else might appreciate it. So I'd have to say that would be one of my most recent accessibility blunders.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example, as was Shani's and Jeff's. Yeah, do you have one? Have you made an oopsie?
Oh yes, in my past life, one of my role as head of marketing was to connect and with people in the deaf community, and there was one point where we were developing communication content specifically in English, so press releases, videos, etc. But we recognized that we weren't getting the traction and the interaction that we were hoping for. And in our, learning, in my learning, is that we were developing content that was not accessible. We need to start incorporating ASL into our press releases. So what we did was, in addition to writing a communication piece, we would then have a link specifically that goes to interpreting, so that someone who's deaf will be able to learn about the content, because English is oftentimes not the first language for people who are deaf, and people don't really know that. And that's a really amazing learning, because ever since all the stuff that I do in terms of multimedia, video, like Shani had mentioned, captioning for sure, ASL for sure. And that is really key in terms of leveling the access to multimedia.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Trisha, what about you?
When haven't I made a blunder? I've made several over my career. I've had a disability since I was 4 months old when I contracted polio. So that's 70 years of having a disability. But it wasn't until I was 46 that I realised I was disabled, which is quite different. And that was when I was working as a research officer for police. And they said to me, "Could you be our disability liaison officer?" And I said, "I don't know anything about that." And they said, "But you've got one." And I went, "Oh, yeah, okay." And that started my journey of blunders, right? I didn't know anybody with a disability. I didn't know how to talk to people with disabilities. Now I have a network of people. My biggest, the people who tell me most often what my blunders are people with intellectual disabilities. And I work with a lot of people with intellectual disability because I'm trusted by them. But they also know that if I forget to use if I use an acronym, they will tell me. If I use a big word, they will tell me. So my learning is every day about how, a bit like what Shani said, you've got to improve every day. And I always reassure people when I'm speaking to them, when they're starting on this journey of inclusion, don't worry about making a mistake. Learn from the mistake. And people will tell you. And mostly they'll tell you in a good way, but sometimes you have to take it on the chin and just, okay, I get that, and move on.
I so agree. As I said, all of it, everybody's examples. I started this job, we were getting organized, start first presentation, ready to go. Okay, PowerPoint's ready to go. Is it accessible? Oh, how do we check? We didn't even know how to check it, right? We do now, and certainly that's something we do now. But in that moment, we'd forgotten, and it was me. It was my office, and I'd missed it, and my team had missed it. It wasn't intentional. Nobody meant to, right? But nobody thought about it. Nobody asked the question, and I say that as well, Trish, to everyone. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail forward, as long as you're failing forward and learning from it and moving on. And, as Carrie Ann said, recognizing that there is no one size fits all solution. Accessibility is really complex. It is difficult. It's not difficult to do the right thing. But it is complex and therefore difficult when you're entering this for the first time, when you're approaching it for the first time, if it's not something you live. So while I'm really confident in my ability to identify and mitigate things related to wheelchair accessibility, I am not an expert when it comes to what is needed for someone who's blind, someone who's deaf, somebody who needs plain language, somebody who needs something else. And there are so many, right? And so we have to be open to learning and expanding. And certainly, I think, most importantly, asking experts, bringing others into the conversation, bringing people with disabilities in, that nothing without us piece really matters in making sure that we all are improving things going forward. Carrie Ann?
I think what we need to also do, though, is to forgive ourselves when we do make those
Sure.
oopsies, those mistakes. Because what I have seen too is, especially those of us who work in the field of disabilities, sometimes we try so hard not to make the mistakes that when we do make the mistake, we just go on and on about it. Oh, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe it. And going forward, then we try to make sure everything is perfect. Nothing will ever be perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Nothing will ever cover everything. There are some blunders that you just don't want to make again. And I agree with that.
Mm.
And you should learn from your mistakes, but you need to learn to forgive yourselves as well.
Yeah. Tricia?
Can I just add that one of my biggest blunders that I made this year was assuming that when people tell you that a hotel room is accessible, not to take them at face value. So my 11 weeks around the world, and I had my niece with me, and I really didn't want her to help me in and out of a bath. But often an accessible room would be a bath with handrails. That's not accessible. And even ringing from Australia to check them when you get there, it's always a drama. So the assumptions that other people are telling you what they really are, they have a view of what accessibility is. And then it's my role to tell them gently, no. I got upgraded several times, but I just got upgraded to a room that had 2 rooms and wasn't accessible.
We could probably have another conversation about the hospitality sector, but we're not here to do that today. But, repeatedly today with all of your comments, the themes I've heard, employment, and how that's intertwined with transportation and procurement and other issues. And I think that reflects just how important it is to people with disabilities, to quality of life, to living with dignity and purpose and independence. And, people with companies who employ people with disabilities are so much more likely to identify barriers sooner and prevent creating them as they go forward. That innovation potential that is off the charts and the business case that just can't be ignored. We talked about the fact that legislation like the EU Act and Accessible Canada Act or the ADA have value and will make a difference, but it isn't the only thing that makes a difference. So much unconscious bias to overcome, changing attitudes. And I think conversations like this one help towards that. And it's why this and the series on talking accessibility that I launched earlier this year, it's an opportunity to let people hear from people with disabilities about what does it mean? What is accessibility? Why does it matter? Why does it matter for everyone? Why does it matter, as Shani said, for planning for our future selves? I just want to encourage everybody here today who's going to watch this online to keep the conversation going. Ask questions. As Carrie Ann said, attitude, first, last, and always. the attitude of wanting to know and wanting to do better and wanting to learn is so important in this. So we're nearing the end of the time. I'm just going to open it up. If you guys have, if any of you have any last thoughts you want to add, any final remarks for today's discussion and celebration of International Day of Disabled Persons. Shani?
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed being in everybody's company. So thank you so much. I think the final thought that I would like to sort of end on is just a reminder for people that every decision that we make can either raise or lower barriers to participation in society. Every single decision. That includes us as disabled people and, of course, non-disabled people too. So my sort of question to everybody watching this, listening to this, is what action will you take to reduce and remove disabling barriers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yat, what about you?
Thank you. I think, recognizing that we all have a role to play in breaking barriers, and understanding the intersectionality of where you are plays a big role as well too. Whether it's privilege, whether it's employment, we all can do our best to help one another to break barriers for one another globally.
Yeah, absolutely. Trisha.
I'm a member of the Disability Leadership Institute, which was started in Canberra 9 years ago and now is in over 20 countries. We have a list of businesses that are owned and run by people with disabilities. And that, to me, has been somewhere that we need to go. We need to start looking beyond the normal, or the usual, not the normal, the usual, and start thinking outside the box. So I've just been approached by somebody who wants to know, can we take on people with intellectual disabilities? And so we're working on that now. We just need to step up as leaders and work better together in the space and support each other as leaders. So in the Leadership Institute, we have opportunities to debrief with each other. And this is a great opportunity for us to do this at a global level, just to say what's working, what's not working, how we can improve it, and how we can bring along those who aren't where we are yet. So I keep saying this isn't about me. This is about the people who I want to empower, who I want to have the same opportunities that I have. So I think that's what I want the rest of the world to know, especially those outside the disability community, to know that we are disability leaders, but beyond that, we are actually leaders in the whole community.
For sure. Carrie-Anne? Final thoughts?
Whenever you ask me a question after Trisha, I feel like saying, oh, what she said.
Ditto.
Ditto. Yeah, ditto. Yes, it's so true. I think if I reflect on the IDPD theme for this year, as leaders within the world of disabilities, I never thought I'd call myself a leader in this field. I always think myself as that crazy little kid, but as the leaders in this field, we need to recognize we have an awesome responsibility, but we're also in an awesome space. We're in a space that we get to help create the future for others that are coming after us. I have a young protege. She's an attorney at law, a field that I had wanted to get into and that I was told I couldn't because I was blind. It is fantastic to see that Barbados has the first totally blind attorney at law in the Caribbean region. And when I think about the fact that I helped to teach her, that's transformative. In small ways and in big ways, the leaders within the disabilities field. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to take up a little bit more time and say this. We also need to safeguard what we're doing. There is an unfortunate trend in the disabilities movement, especially in the blindness field, maybe in others as well. And the heads of our organizations, the people that are standing at the forefront, are not people who have the disability that they're championing. we are quietly being replaced in a lot of spaces as the experts, as the leaders in our field of disability. They're using the fact that we said that we're equal, they're using it against us in a lot of ways, because they're saying, you know, if you want to be considered as a leader, you have to have all of this as well. You don't have it? Okay, fine. We'll go get somebody outside of your realm to do this for you. And we need to be careful. We are the leaders, and we need to make sure that not only we know this, but we help others to understand and respect it.
Absolutely. Thanks. Jeff, what about you? Wrap it up.
I always think about this in 3 ways. For anyone listening who has a disability, if you haven't found your inner voice to recognize that your disability can be one of your greatest strengths, I highly encourage that you find a mentor who shares the same disability, who you can learn from. Mentors change lives. I know so many of us that didn't have a mentor, someone that was, in my case, blind, low vision until I was later in life. Mentors change lives. For those of us with disabilities, there's a phrase I absolutely love, and that is life begins at the end of your comfort zone. It's so easy to tighten our comfort zone and to protect ourselves, but life begins when we push the envelope. For any manager that's listening, you don't have to be an expert, but do me a favor. Reach out to your HR accommodations team and just understand what the process is when you have an employee that comes to you. Oftentimes their back might be to the wall, or they're really vulnerable. You don't have to know everything about the process. If you can refer, you can be a great manager. Know where to refer that employee to and walk with them. It can be a beautiful thing. And for any senior leader that is watching, everybody's opinions and life experience matter equally. But in reality, oh my gosh, when a senior leader finds their inner voice and leads with their disability, it's just exponential return. So that's how I would wrap it up.
Well, it's a good way to wrap it up. Thanks. And we've come to the end of our time. I can't believe how quickly it went by, but I knew that was going to happen. I'd love to just keep chatting with you all night or all day, depending on where you are. You've all shared such great information and given us so much to consider and think about. Thank you, my friends, for joining me today. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. I encourage you to gather your own networks for conversations like this one and keep the knowledge exchange and collaboration going. Please share this video widely. Collaboration, whether it be with our local partners, between levels of government, or internationally, is absolutely critical in arriving at the best solutions for everyone. And we all stand to learn so much from one another. Finally, I'd like to wish everyone a happy International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Keep pushing for more and faster action. Here's to a barrier-free world. Thank you.